Welcome to Let's Talk Church and Other Things. I am your host, Shirla, and today my co host is Miss Yolanda.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
That's good. Thank you for agreeing to come and do the episode with us on today. Our guest today is Elder Troylynda Williams
Uh-huh.
from Providence. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. So, for those that don't know Troylynda, tell us a little bit about yourself.
With outside the church world, I'm a community relations manager. I work with people with disabilities. And within the church world, I am an elder and serve on the pastoral staff at Church on the Rock, Kingdom Cathedral, where the leadership is Archbishop John Joseph and Pastor Carla Brown.
Good, good. I know them well. Hello to both of them. So today our episode is going to touch on battling depression while serving God or battling depression while being a part of ministry. And Elder Troylynda, thank you for agreeing to come and share your story with us in regards to uh, the struggle that you had with depression and what you had to go through and where you are now. So I'm going to yield the floor to you to share your story with us.
Oh, thank you again for having me and having this discussion because it is important, especially with those within the church world, because depression is real. It's not a mythological thing. It's not something that's made up. People globally deal with it that have different aspects of life, but mine, I've had depression undiagnosed since I was in my early 20s. And I knew what it looked like because I have close family members that deal with it, and it is something that runs on my father's side of the family, particularly with the women. Since in my 20s, I realized signs that I had it, but I just always was able to shake it. If I woke up on a particular day not feeling myself, not feeling motivated, irritable, I already knew kind of what it was, but I was always able to shake it off. Fast forward to my mid 30s, right before COVID ended, the year before it ended, I actually started dealing with it a lot. I'm sure there were factors that made it even worse, but I was already dealing with it for a very long time. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was a teenager. So I knew that eventually, if I couldn't shake it, I was going to have to get some type of help with it. Of course, being spiritual, I went to leadership first and I was, getting counsel through them. Not saying that it wasn't helping, but I knew that I needed something more. So the first step for me was to acknowledge, okay, you're not able to control this anymore, and be realistic with where you're at. So I was able to have that talk with myself. I hit a really, really bad breaking point. Suicidal thoughts are real with depression. You isolating yourself. You don't even know you're doing it. Others will probably tell you you're isolating yourself and you won't see it as that. Matter of fact, you may become a bit defensive because you feel like they are maybe attacking you for not wanting to be around. But those are type of signs. I was crying often, and I'm really not a crier, but I was crying often and really couldn't explain why. I just knew I wasn't in a good place. Had a lot of dark days. And for a while, I chose to battle that by myself before I even really spoke to anybody about it. But, I talked to leadership about it. They started counseling, of course, prayer, but I needed to actually talk to somebody that was really professional, and this is what they did for a living.
Okay, I'm going to interject for a minute. So, explain the difference between anxiety and depression.
So anxiety is more so triggered by stressors. Um, it's more so triggered by being overwhelmed, rather it be work, family. It's just a collective of things that are happening directly or indirectly because we take on things sometimes that we don't need to. But with anxiety, it's more so stress related, and it's also seasonal related at times. So mine was more so stress related because I internalize things often. I'm one of those take a look and keep it ticking type people.
And then what were your signs of depression? Because you said you realized, I think, in your 20s that it was more depression.
I'm very aware of myself. Even for the age that I am, privy to me hitting that 40 mark, I really was raised to be aware of myself. So I was really aware of myself. I'm an extrovert. I feed on other people's energy. I don't mind being around people. I get introverted moments when I need a break, but 90% of the time I like to be around people. When I don't want to be around people and I don't want to get out of bed, I'm one of those alarm clock goes off and I could jump up and move at high speed, get to work. I could cook breakfast and get dressed and be to work for 8:30 in the morning, waking up at 7 o'clock. When I'm not able to do that, I don't even have desire to eat. I can bypass meals. I can send people to voicemail that I talk to on a regular. It was things within my behavior that changed, and I had no reason. The person's call that I would send to voicemail, they didn't do anything to me. We didn't have any battles going on. I had no reason to do it. I just didn't feel like talking. Also, like I said, that motivation to get up, get the day started, it was very sluggish. Very, very sluggish. And I just wasn't motivated. I didn't see why I needed to get up. Even though I know I had things I had to take care of, but nothing that I had to take care of was enough motivation for me to get out of the house even, let alone get out of the bed. I didn't want to even get out of the house. I was okay with being solo.
It sounds so familiar, not for myself, but for people close to me that I know who suffer with depression, who have been diagnosed with depression. What would you say to those who are in church, in ministry even, who are struggling, not knowing which way to go, how to get help? What would you advise them to do?
For those that are in the church, if you're in a ministry or of a ministry, the first thing would be for you to be vulnerable enough to talk to your leadership about it. And then if you have close people that's around you, it could be a close friend, sibling, whatever, talk to them, because you would be surprised who they may know that they can point you in the right direction. And you may even be surprised they have their own journey of their bouts with it as well. And that's what I did. Outside of talking to my leaders, I started talking to people that was close to me. And it was only people that were close to me for a very long time, because I wasn't ready to be vulnerable to say, hey, this is what I think I might have. I'm not even diagnosed yet at this time. So this is what I'm like, I think I might have it. I'm looking at history of my grandmother. I'm looking at, history of my great aunts and other cousins and family members that have been diagnosed. And I'm like, that's me. I'm seeing a reflection. So within ministry, you really do have to feel okay with going to leadership, and your leadership has to know you as well. Because if you're operating outside of someone that you're not, that's when their discernment kicks into and say, okay, something's off. And so you may not be able to go to them initially, but they should also sense something as well. And they may be the one to initiate what is wrong, what's going on.
Right. So what kind of advice did you get from leadership and maybe family and friends prior to going to seek professional help?
It was a lot of talking, a lot of prayer, a lot of talking. And honestly, at first, leadership had to hear some of my family history, how this came about or when exactly this came about. And then they also had to take a listen to what I was currently encountering in life that kind of had me going into that space. So leadership has to listen first. And it also helps if they have experience with depression, rather they deal with it themselves or they've dealt with others in dealing with depression. They're knowledgeable with some things as well. But they ought to listen at first, because if you don't listen, you don't know where to start to help them.
So what happens, or should I say, what advice do you have for people who unfortunately don't have the leadership that you had? And they go to leadership saying, it's a spirit, the spirit of depression. We just have to pray it off you. And not actually, helping that person get to that next level. What would you suggest? Like, what would you say to people who, because at some point they're lost and they're not sure which way to go?
Well, depression, it is a spirit, but that cannot be just a sign of this is where we're going to deal with it on the ministry level, right? So for those who do not have leadership or maybe attend the church, and like you said already, they're lost and they're trying to maybe find their way back, that's when you utilize those who are close to you. You got to have at least somebody. It could be your doctor. And for me, that was my start. Was for my doctor, was my primary care physician, who is amazing. Got to give him a shout out, Dr. David Maku, who diagnosed me with my anxiety. But it's good if you only need that one person. You don't have to wear a T-shirt and create a bumper sticker about it saying I'm lost and I think I'm going through this. And that's why it's also good to have people around you that know you. Somebody's going to pick up on it because there's such a huge shift in your personality and behavior. So for people to be around you enough, someone has to say, okay, what's wrong? Because that happened to me too a few times before I actually was like, okay, I need to talk about this.
So when the person who knows you realizes there's something off, but they come to you and say what's wrong, but you're not receptive of them coming to you asking, and so you kind of brush them off, then what?
And that's what I did. I brushed them off. I didn't want to talk about it. I wasn't in a place, because when you're in the midst of starting to deal with it and it's getting really, really heavy, you yourself are trying to process, is this really happening to me? Like, what is going on? And then you're still fighting to remain who you are or who you know yourself to be. So for a good while, you're in a battle with yourself, and that takes a while. So once you kind of finagle and get through the battle within yourself of processing, okay, this is happening, something isn't right, you may not even be able to put a finger on it yourself like I was able to do, or like others are able to do. There are a lot of people out there who know something is off balance with them, but they have no earthly idea where to start. It's a challenge to really get to that place to say, okay, something's wrong. And until you get to that place to say, I need help, people coming to help you, the friend or family member saying you're off, something's wrong, you will continue to blow them off. The best thing that they can do, not nag you, but at the same time, don't let up. Because sooner or later, you're going to come around and you're going to want someone there to talk. And so for that non-judgmental person in your life who isn't going to look at you and say, oh, you've been crazy lately, when literally in your mind you feel like you are, they need to be a safe space and safe place for you to talk when you are ready to talk. And that's what I heard a lot. It was helpful. All right, whenever you're ready. And I have friends and family, whenever you're ready, I know something's off, but whenever you're ready, whatever I can help, whatever I can do, make yourself available and keep checking in on that person regardless. Even though they may not respond to a text or phone call, they're getting the messages and the text messages that you're sending. They may not be in a place to respond yet, but they're getting it.
So when you decided to go for the professional help, was it because leadership saw that in spite of all their talking and all the praying and all that stuff, there was still something off, and they felt that you needed to like really go seek professional help? So did they suggest that, or did you just realize, you know what, all that praying and all that stuff ain't working and I need to add to it?
The good thing is that the leadership that I encounter, they are aware that professional help is needed. They're all for therapy. Troy, you should try it. That's the nickname, but Troy, you try therapy. Go talk to your doctor. Upon the prayer and the word and all that stuff, they were encouraging me, you should talk to your doctor, talk to a professional team. They're the ones that could really get this thing diagnosed so that we can actually know what to pray for and to support you through. So leadership is helpful. If leadership is on the bandwagon with, it's not that God isn't enough, but God has placed other resources on this earth for us to tap into, to utilize. If it were not so, we wouldn't have all these medical professionals that are able to assist people through all these type of different avenues of their life. But your leadership has to be okay with the fact that it's needed.
Amen to that.
Sorry, but I just put that out there.
Nah, that's truth right there, because, if leadership, we'll be surprised if we took a survey, like even if they did it anonymously, I'm sure there's a lot of leaders that are in therapy right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of leaders that go through depression. I mean, I remember speaking with someone and they told me about how they walked up on a guest preacher, at a big venue, and they went because they knew him, and the guy was taking shots. And his wife was like, listen, that's the only way he can get through it. He's anointed. He's preaching. He's anointed because God's going to use whomever he will. But he had issues. And the only way he could get through being able to get out there and give that sermon and, give the people what God said, he literally takes shots before and I'm talking about shots of alcohol, before he goes out there to preach. And that was so sad because it's like, yeah, the wife knows, but where's the rest of the dignitary? Where's his brothers? Because we're supposed to uphold our brothers, right? So you go and you got to let them know that it's okay, man. And you'll find out when you go seek help, there's others in there seeking help as well. So kudos to leadership that knows that it's more than just prayer. And as you stated, God put these people in place for a reason.
That's right.
So, utilize your medical because you're paying for it.
Exactly.
And go get the help that you need. So at what point in your life did you say, okay, I'm going to seek the professional help?
It got to a point where it was not just restlessness physically, but mentally, my brain would not stop. I remember having an encounter, I'll never forget the time because I looked at the clock, at 2:43 in the morning. It was on a Thursday morning, and my brain just would not stop. But it wasn't so much of a running on 1,000 like can typically happen to people when there's a lot going on as far as schedules are concerned or just a busy life. It just would not stop with just like thoughts that were just not healthy. The suicidal thoughts did not stop. The self-doubt thoughts didn't stop. The worthlessness thoughts did not stop. Everything that was contrary to what I have been raised to know about myself, and then what I learned about myself that was good, and that's not to say there's perfection in me, because there isn't, but the things that I know I'm okay in, it was hard for me to get those to raise up out of the dark places. And I started to listen, and my brain just would not stop. And I wish I could explain what that feels like, but literally I felt like I was going crazy. It took everything in me not to call Butler and check myself in. It took everything not to do it. And the only thing that stopped me is because of pride, in the sense of, if you go to Butler, what about your job? You got to get money. And I'm going to lose that medical. That's going to pay for this doctor, this therapist, or whatever medicine I need. And then I'm going through school as well. I went back to school. And so I'm like, and I was on the dean's list. And I'm like, if I go to Butler now, then school's on pause. I waited all these years to return back to school to get a degree, to better myself. And it's like, am I going to lose it all? Am I going to lose that all? And so there was a side of me that had to start fighting. I don't even know where the fight came from, to be honest with you. And I would have to say that it was God, because I knew it wasn't of myself. Because myself would have said, check yourself in a Butler, take a 3 weeks there. I'm familiar with Butler. I've been there plenty of times with people that I support in my agency. So I know their capabilities. I know the process of intake, all that stuff. You can't talk to your family like the first 78 hours. I already know all about that stuff. But I'm like, I'm going to lose everything. But it was just that moment. And we went into Holy Convocation. And we went through a week of consecration before Holy Convocation. Holy Convocation is in August every year. And we consecrate every week before that.
And what year was this?
This was just last year.
Okay.
Just last year. This time last year, I literally was feeling like I was losing my mind. And so, my method that I do when going on consecration is I delegate every day for something in particular. Rather be for lost souls that may come off the street, rather be for those who are attending that we plan on attending, the youth leadership, whatever it is. But my last day, I always designate to myself. At that point, I'm talking to God about what are you going to give me, and what can I receive, and how can I praise you and bless you during this convocation? And in my prayer time on that last day, I told God, if you don't do something during this holy convocation, I made up in my mind I was going to go check myself in. I was going to go get through holy convocation, do all that work that convocation takes, for those that know it. Those that know, I'm looking at Tyandra because Tyandra knows it's nonstop.
Frying that
Frying
chicken,
serving, ushering, being babysitters. We already, and we were only 14 if we was young. So I grew up with convocation being tedious. So I said, let me get through this, task, and then I'm going to check myself in. But I told God, I'm like, you have to do something. I can't keep, I just knew I can no longer keep ticking like that. I knew it.
so would you like to tell us what God did? Because I saw it
You saw it.
by accident.
Yes. So, and again, in my conversation that I had with you, not long actually after that happened, but Shirley, she's so nurturing. No matter how old you are, she's so nurturing. Oh, my Troy. She's like, when I see my Troy. I'm like, Shirley, it was tough. And I told God, if you're going to have somebody prophesy to me, they're going to have to say something that only you and I have communicated about. I don't need a generic, you're going to get a house. And I could get a house if my credit's right. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me about a new car. I can get any car that I want as long as my credit's right. I don't want to hear that. Tell me something that's going to fix my spirit.
Right.
And then the spirit of depression. Tell me something that's going to break with that. And so I have a terminology that I use often when I feel like God's taking too long to answer me or something. And when I'm talking to close friends about it or family members about it, I'm like, I think God wants to box me. I'm like, and I know I'm not going to win. My arms are too short, as the song says. But I'm like, I still say it. And that is the first thing that the preacher that night said to me. He said, I'm going to say something to you. And he said, and God told me to tell you, and I'm going to use your exact verbiage. He said, you literally wanted to box God. When he said that, I was like, all right, I'm listening. What do you got, God, after this? What I'm listening. And so he went into the details of, the curse of depression being on me from generation. He went through the place in my mind where I felt like I was going to go crazy. There was even a time, and I don't know if I even shared this with you in our talk, but there was even a time where I would sleep at night and I would feel so bad with chest pains and I would get shortness of breath. And there was a time that it happened, and I knew anxiety, so it wasn't anxiety, because that happens at times with anxiety, but it wasn't anxiety. And I got it one episode really, really bad, and I'm praying. I'm like, God, all right, I don't know what's going on. I hate hospitals, but I'm like, I can't do this. And clear as day, as we're having a conversation, the devil told me he was going to kill me. He told me he was going to give me a heart attack. And that man said it in that same prophetic word. He said, the devil tried to give you a heart attack. This one almost gave you, and he said, this one almost gave you a heart attack, meaning I've been through bouts of depression before, but they've never been that bad or taken that long for me to shake. And so I just knew, okay, you don't have power and control over this. And that night, a spiritual happening did take place, and it was able to break. Ironically, a week before convocation, I was diagnosed with depression from my primary care physician, and I was placed on medication. I don't like just taking any type of medication, so my medication conversation was at length with him for multiple reasons. But we got on we found a medication for me that would work. I'm aware of these, psychological medications, of course, because of the field of work that I'm in. So I knew what to tell him not to put me on, because I knew the effects that others have had on it. Women of color in particular, it was with other diagnoses going on that it could cause other issues. So we had those conversations. But I started taking medication, and then immediately following the week that I started taking medication, that's when I got diagnosed. And after that was the experience that I had at church, where I had my spiritual encounter. I think God had it work simultaneously. So I saw the regular doctor. I haven't gone to therapy. I actually had to talk to a family member to find a therapist, because it's hard to find a therapist in this state. It is not just the state, it's all over. But it's particularly hard to find a therapist if you're going to want someone that can understand an African American and then an African American woman. It's kind of hard to be a therapist to somebody if you have no idea of what their potential backgrounds are or encounters are. So I had to go to a family member to find a therapist.
So that when I say I found it by accident, so I'll never forget. It was a Friday night. I was sitting at home, and they were in Holy Convocation, but I was at home, and I was on Facebook, and they were doing. You all were doing live, I believe it was,
So
but I didn't
Thursday.
watch the service that was going on Friday night. I went to the Thursday night service, and it was long. So I fast forwarded and and I'm always the type of person I'm like, this is just my opinion. I don't like when they record prophecies. I don't like that, because I'm like, if you're not there, first of all, I don't like when they speak loud. They should be talking to the individual in their ear. But if you're not there, if you're sitting at home, you should not know what, you know what I mean? Go to service.
Right.
So I don't like when they record that. I think at that point they should tell them to stop recording. That's just my opinion. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think he was talking loudly to you. A couple of things he said, because I remember your mom responding, and he said something like, who are you, or something
that?
like that.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm her mother. And he says, okay, basically, so
said, "I
you
know."
can attest,
Yeah.
to what.
It
But-
was to the comment of, you literally want to box God. And so leadership made a comment and said, if you know Troylynda, that's Troylynda. Like, if you know her, she'll try to fight in a minute. And that's why my mom laughed. And then he's like, who's laughing? And she said, oh, that's me. And then he said, oh, that's mom. You're good. She said, I'm sorry. Then he said, you're good, because he knows my mom. But
Right.
yeah.
So as he began to minister to her, the cry, like, it just, because I'm like, that's my Troy. I mean, the crying, and I'm like, oh my God, like, you knew she had been going through something. It wasn't the normal cry, but you also knew that she was getting her breakthrough at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was like, I had to hit her up after, probably the following week, and like, Troy,
Yeah, I
you
think
okay?
so.
Like, girl.
Yeah, you said that
I
too.
was sitting in my chair, like, tears coming down, like, oh. But, it was a combination of, oh, my heart hurts for her, but, oh, I'm thankful that she's getting her
Yeah,
breakthrough.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I watched Troylynda grow up, and I know how she reacts in church, and that was
Out
not
of
the
character.
norm. Yeah, that was not the norm. So thank God for breakthrough.
Yes.
So that happened that night, and then now you start the professional part of it, or you just take the medication. Are you going for therapy, or?
I'm still in therapy. I'm not in therapy 5 days a week like I was in the beginning.
Really, you were going?
I was
5
going
days?
like 5, and she was on call like 5 days a week. Like, I really, it was terrible. And within therapy, I knew there was healing that I had to go through from other things that I had encountered in life. And that was the thing. While I was smack dead in the middle of dealing with the depression, some things had transpired in April personally, and then to my family, and then it was like days apart. And one of the things that transpired, we thought it was going to be one thing, and then we got an email and it was like something completely different that we were not expecting. So there was a few things that I think set me back that I had to battle with and come to terms with. So I don't think that helped while all that came out while I was dealing with the depression. But at the same time, I'm not mad that it did, because while I was, having conversation with the therapist helped me navigate even those things that I still needed to kind of heal from and be free, because I still had triggers and traumas that I needed to deal with. And one thing that I learned is, if it's still triggering, you're not healed from it.
Right.
It should not
Right.
bother you at all.
Right.
And so I ended up going to an event, and I was able to go untriggered, just completely untriggered. So, and I actually asked my pastor to accompany me, because I just did not know how I was going to respond in the environment. But I wasn't triggered. I was okay. People got up, spoke, had words. I was good. I was good. And for the second thing that transpired, I did have a talk with my brother Jared, who doesn't always make sense to me sometimes, but what he said made sense that day, and it kind of calmed my spirit. But therapy definitely helped. I still go about 4 to 5 times out of the month. I take my medication regularly. I do not skip a beat. I'm set up for morning. Matter of fact, when I was outside waiting, took my little 7 o'clock and I was good. But medicine, therapy, support from leadership or family, loved ones, it's important to have. I can't leave out my parents, and my sister and I, Shirley knows, are extremely close. And then when I told one of my brothers, Jared, when I talked to him about it, it actually opened up a dialogue to say, hey, I've been there too. Oh, wow, that's what that is. And I'm like, don't be embarrassed or shameful or stubborn to the point where you don't go get help. Go get it. It's worth it. It'll save your life.
So for someone who may not like to take medication, did that particular medicine that you're on, did you have side effects or?
None. And that's what I encourage those who are like me, that is not a fan of taking meds. I just don't like I hate taking medicine. I can't stand it. And there may be others like that, or others who are on meds and are nervous that it may interact in a negative way with something that they're already on. You are not wrong if you talk to your doctor and tell them, I don't want these side effects. I don't want to become extra irritable first for 3 months before I see the results. I don't want if you have to up my dose a little bit to make me like a zombie. It's okay to have that conversation with your doctor, and that's what I did. I don't want these type of side effects. I don't want that going on. I don't want that going on. What does that leave me with? What are our options? Don't stop me on a high dosage. My body's not accustomed to something, simmering me out. If we have to wean me on, if you feel like my dose should be, 2.5 milligrams, stop me at 0.5. Let's wean me up. You know what I mean?
Right.
But people have to be okay with advocating. You should have anybody that is seeing you once a year or more, depending on your need, that could poke at you, tell you your heart rate, tell you if you're healthy, tell you all this stuff about you. Anybody that you can sit down with and tell your physical, personal business to, you should be able to have the conversation and saying, this is what I'm looking for. I know I need the assistance, but I don't want to feel like this. It's okay to advocate. Some medical professionals will just throw you on anything, and some won't even ask you, are you okay with X, Y, Z? Or even initiate the conversation. So if they don't initiate the conversation when you're having those talks about medicine, advocate for yourself, because it's not going to come to them to do it. Their job is to see the issue, the diagnosis. This is what we can use to treat it. How about that?
I think too, some people don't know how to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? And so in those instances, do you know of any organizations, any groups, any people that someone can reach out to just to even have those conversations about advocacy, or just to get direction, as to where to go and what to do? You were blessed to have a family member that could, give you some advice about who you could see. And I know that there are other people out there who would like to know what to do, how to go, how to move forward, and just are paralyzed because they have no clue.
So for me, I actually had to do a lot of Googling because I didn't know of any agencies or organizations that would point me in the right direction. I had no idea. I'm a Google queen. So I literally started Googling African-American women that were therapists in Rhode Island. I was willing to travel to Tiverton if I had to, because that's the place that I was at. Unfortunately, that's where I started. And I wish that I didn't, because it is more helpful if somebody can guide you in the right direction. And it may avoid you from going through so many hurdles of finding that right one. That alone will add more frustration to what you're already going through. I literally had to search Google. I talked to certain family members that I knew was in that type of field. Lucky enough, my sister actually worked with a young lady that was a therapist and knew the circuit to kind of connect me to. So I was able to get that. Honestly, the only thing that I could really say, unfortunately, because I don't know of any organizations, is to communicate. It's to talk. And it may not be to everybody, but if there's one person, like you said, not everybody's able to advocate for themselves. But if you have that one person who will do the footwork for you because you're maybe not able to advocate. And some people are not even in space. If they were in a space, they would do it. But some people are not even in that space at that time to do it. That's why you have advocates, like you mentioned, and they'll start doing that footwork for you. So I had to navigate it on my own. I really, and I hate that. I really, really do, because not everybody has that time.
Right.
Some people, it's too late. They are successful with their suicides. Unfortunately. Some people don't have, and this is why I say, if you see that somebody's off, something's not right, do not wait for them to tell you. You know that person. You know them well enough, and you don't have to do a public thing. You don't got to go on Facebook. Talk to them one-on-one. And they may not even want to tell you what's going on, but for you to acknowledge that something is not quite right, that's their invitation from you to say, hey, you know what? They're probably a safe person. If they're asking me, they're probably a safe person. And so if you have a safe person, they'll do whatever they need to help you. I would, like you stated, I was fortunate. I really, really was. And I wish there was more advocacy. I wish there was more organizations and agencies that were around that were way more so in eyes view and easy to find for those who don't have the time. I literally just wrote a paper for school on Sunday, and my paper, it dealt with mental illness within African American women. And I ended up basically dedicating the end of my paper, I ended up dedicating it to a very close friend of mine who almost 11 years ago committed suicide. She was extremely young. And I wish I knew. They don't always tell you. So
Right.
I wish I knew. She spoke to her mother moments before she did it. In her conversation with mom, nothing seemed off. So it's you can't be afraid to be, I don't want to say intrusive, but intrusive. Because the moment that you say, I'm going to call, but then don't, or the moment you say, I'm going to go by and don't, that may be the time that unfortunately that person, male, female, whoever, is successful with ending their own lives, because there's nothing else in their mind beating at that dark place. There's nothing else there.
Yeah, and some people are just so good at suppressing
Hiding.
it. And then when you hear about, this one took their lives or this happened to this one, and it's like, dang, we didn't even know, like,
Right.
because they become professional at suppressing it.
That was me. I was diagnosed with functional depression. I was going to work. So I was in school. I was cooking Thanksgiving and everything with my sister. I was going to basketball games. I was singing praise and worship. I was preaching. I was administrating for my leader. I was doing all of that. I was being super auntie to my nieces and nephews. I talked to my parents every day. My sister and I talked several times a day. And I was in a dark place, but still functioning. My doctor literally told me, he said, you have functional depression. You're able to keep it ticking, but it's when you're by yourself. When you stop, whenever you stop long enough, that's when it starts to hit you. And something that brings me out would be, I got to go to work, or somebody comes by and they're already in my house. And I'm like, I didn't let you in. How'd you get in here? That kind of thing. But it's hard to do. But to put on that face of everything's fine, to put on that facade, everything is fine, to kind of keep, and I know I was doing it because I didn't want people to know. I didn't, because within my family, I am a pillar. I am the strong one. So my mindset was, if they see me breaking, then what are they gonna think? Like, if Troylynda's losing it, oh my God, what? Like, okay, if Troy's losing it, something's bad. Like, this is not good. And then I didn't want them to go into panic mode. So it took a lot for me. I hid it as long as I could, but I had a breaking point. I couldn't hide it anymore. Even my mom was like, I'm coming to your house. Something, and honestly, that's what ended up happening. Every Thursday, my mother came to my house, and if sometimes we just sat and watched TV. We didn't say a thing. She didn't ask me anything. We would just sit, watch TV. I would have bouts when I would just cry. She didn't ask me why I was crying, but she would just sit and watch TV. And then when I felt like in a moment to talk, she didn't speak. She would just listen. She didn't have anything back to say. Like, oh, Troylynda, you know, that's a trick of the devil. And I already know that. And she knew that in that moment that wasn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So the fact that she listened. So my mom was at my house almost every Thursday. My sister, after work, she got 3 kids. Every Friday, my sisters, and they still come by. every Friday, because they didn't want me to feel like I was left alone or that I had to be by myself. There's not a day that I go by and not hear from my father. So, you know, it was just, if you don't want people around and knowing, you keep them away.
Yep. And for anyone who may be listening, we do have an 800 number that you can call for substance abuse and mental health services. It's 1-800-662-4357, 1-800-662-HELP. And there's also the National Hope Line Network for anyone who may be listening and you're feeling suicidal and you don't have anyone to go to and you feel like people don't understand. The number's 1-800-SUICIDE, 1-800-784-2433. And before we conclude this episode, I have special guests that are here all the way from Finland. What is going on, Granger?
Hey.
You'll edit it.
Okay. Yeah, what is going on? Everything's going on, but good. Still alive and well. Glad to be here with y'all today.
So good to have you. And introduce us to your wife.
This is my wife, Odetta Lee Simmons.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Odetta. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. We're so glad to have you. So Granger had hit me up because he was going to be in Rhode Island and he wanted to, you know, just stop in. And it just so happened we were doing this episode today on depression. And he told me about the book that his wife wrote. So Odetta, would you like to tell us a little about your book? Can you turn the mic to her? There you go.
Sure. So the book, first of all, it's in Finnish at the moment. So it's being translated into English as we speak. The book is actually about anger and dealing with suppressed and repressed anger, how to locate it if it's somewhere inside you, how to face it, how to process it, and then how to learn how to deal with anger in the future and in different situations. And in my case, I found out that I had a lot of repressed anger because of the racism that I experienced as a child and as a teenager in Finland. So what happened was I got very depressed because I didn't know that I was allowed to be angry. I didn't know that I was allowed to defend myself. I was just really scared. So the correct emotion in that time would have been to get angry, to defend my boundaries and to set boundaries. And I didn't know to do that. I was so fearful. I was only 13 anyway. Mm-hmm. But so all of that anger got trapped inside of me. And later on, it turned into depression. And so when I wrote the book, I was talking to people about it, different professionals, counselors, doctors, and also people who have dealt with anger and repressed anger in their own life. And they were like, you have to write this down. Others need to hear this because so many are I've dealt with this. Such and such has dealt with this, And I was like, okay, it's a very interesting topic as a Christian to write about anger. But I felt that it was necessary. So that's what it's about. It's basically delving into this topic through my own story, mm-hmm. Adding some, psychology and professional kind of tidbits and opinions and little nuggets of information in there, and also scripture. Mm-hmm. So, in a nutshell.
Nice. So I'm going to pry just a little bit. Mm-hmm. So you started dealing with the anger at 13. At what point do you feel it went into depression?
It went into depression pretty quickly, but the depression just kind of accumulated. So that by time I was like in my 20s, I was on medication. So I never was able to connect the root of my depression to anger, because I was always a good girl. I was always so nice to everyone, and I was the perfect little angel. It would have been so embarrassing to admit that, oh my gosh, I'm full of anger, you know? So, yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Anyone else have a question?
How did you, at what point, I guess, did you realize that it was the anger that you'd been suppressing all that time?
Well, it was a time where I found myself really irritated a lot. I got irritated just little things, like if the dishwasher wasn't done, you know, just Granger will tell you. And I was just I was like, Lord, what is going on? You know, I just couldn't pinpoint what was going on. And I was just feeling like I didn't want to see anyone. I just wanted to be alone in our house, in my room. This was just a few years ago. And all of a sudden, one time, I was laying down in my bed and I woke up, and it was the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, there's anger in you. And at first I was like, no, not me. Definitely not me. I was like completely denying it. I was like, it's not possible. I'm not an angry person, you know? But he said, no, there's a lot of anger because of the hurt and abuse that you suffered. And it just went right through me. And I started crying. And I was like, wow, it really hit me. And I had to really admit it and put aside the shame that came along with like being a good girl with anger inside. Yeah.
So when Troylynda was sharing her story prior to you getting here, and she talked about, you know, she had leadership to go to, and she had like some people that she could speak to even prior to really going to like the doctor and getting medication. Did you have that?
I spoke to Granger. I told him about it, and he took it very well, as if he already knew. But I didn't go to anyone really at that point. I was just trying to digest this thing, because to me there was like, I don't know, it just felt so weird that I would be dealing with something like that, and I was still kind of embarrassed about it. So I didn't go to anyone at first. I just kept it to myself and was kind of, like I said, digesting it.
Good. So I don't think I have any more questions. Anybody else have any questions?
I think she made an interesting point to say that she didn't feel like she had the right to be angry or defend herself, or, you know, based on the discrimination that she was experiencing. And I think sometimes when we're talking about Christian and we're talking about ministers, I think we're also, it's the same thing, right? They don't feel like they have the right to reach out to get help, because, and then the embarrassment or shame that's sometimes associated with mental health issues, you know, depression. I think that people just need to be given it's okay. You know, it's okay. You know, you can reach out, you can get help. And sometimes they just need to be given the okay.
Right. So,
Normalize it.
yeah.
That's become more normalized.
So I'm going to ask Odetta and then Troylynda the same question. So if you could give a word of advice to someone who may be battling with depression, and in Troylynda's story, she started with anxiety, you know, in her teenage years, and then it developed into depression. But so, you know, I have a family member right now that's dealing with anxiety bad. And it's like, oof, I don't want to see it go into depression. Which I learned something, because I didn't realize it could lead to that.
I used to pass out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize. And she goes through the crying, and I'm like, what are you crying for? Like, but, and everything like that goes on, she like clings to it. And I'm like, but that's not even really your concern. So why? But I'm learning as I'm going through the process with her. But so for Troylynda, it started out as anxiety. With you, it was anger. So what advice would you give to someone, you know, who may be battling it? And there's probably a lot of people out here that don't even realize that they have it.
Yeah, that's one thing, is that what I talk about in my book also is how to distinguish it. in your life? What kind of behaviors, what kind of thought patterns might be going on in your life that are actually connected to anger that we may not even notice, whether it's being passive aggressive or a people pleaser, which you would never think that people pleasing can be attached to actually anger. And so I would say that just pause and just be willing to be open and honest with yourself and put aside all shame for a moment, all embarrassment, all of everything, like all the things that you think that a good person or a good Christian should be. Just put that aside and be vulnerable before God. And if you have a trusted friend or a mentor or a pastor or anyone who you can talk to, just be open and honest to be able to like take the cap off the jar, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, or the lid off the jar. And that will, I think it's all a process. And don't expect it to be done necessarily overnight. You know, there's a lot of healing sometimes that needs to happen, and it takes some time. So be willing to give yourself that time and that grace to go through the process.
Troy?
I think I kind of already said it earlier. You have to get to a place where you're vulnerable within yourself. Process it within yourself. Like something is off, something is going on. And I would even challenge people to not even label yourself with anything. Because at that point, when you're angry or anxiety, you're not thinking I'm a Christian. You know God, you trust God, you know, but it's like, I'm not even thinking about I'm a Christian right now. I'm just Troylynda, or, you know what I mean, whoever, it doesn't matter. Take away that you may be a mom. Take away you may be a daughter, father. It doesn't matter. In that moment, you're not in a good space. And it's okay, no matter the voice that says you can't do this, or you can't say, or you should feel ashamed, or you should be embarrassed. Kill that voice, because I guarantee you, somebody probably that you came in contact with that day has the same thing that you're going on. They're just not saying it. So first of all, become okay with yourself and knowing that this is what I'm going through. Take the time to process. Don't wait till the last minute, but take the time to process, and then identify what type of help you need.
Right. That's good. Great advice. So to anyone who may be listening, and whether it's yourself or someone that you know, like, we hope that something was said that will help you. And if I could just like petition everyone, pay attention to your loved ones, to your friends. You know, as soon as you notice something is not right, jump on it. Like Troylynda said earlier, don't nag them, but show that you're concerned. And there's a difference, because nagging is like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, what is wrong? I know something, you know, I ain't going to talk to you no more. Nope, that's not what they need. They need you to say, you know what, what's going on? You're a little off today. Well, listen, you don't want to talk, but let's pray together. Okay, you don't want to pray? Well, I'm going to pray for you. But then check on that person. Like, don't just leave them, because everyone doesn't have someone to go to.
That's right.
They just don't. Like, in this room, we've all been blessed. We have someone to go to. First of all, we know the advocate,
Right.
Amen.
the Father.
For one, right.
So that helps a lot. But you know what? We can't see him in the flesh. And sometimes it's like, yo, dude, what are you doing? Because I'm calling on you. These tears are coming down. And where are you? So you need that person that you can also go to. So yeah, if you are listening and you are that person, or you know someone who may be going through anxiety, depression, closing themselves off, reach out to them. Show that you love them. Be concerned. Don't just leave them, because when they're gone, don't be that person crying, going crazy over their casket, especially if you didn't do anything to try to help. Now, if you did all you could, then okay, you can have your moment. But if you're not doing anything but watching, you're not helping. So with that being said, I'm going to give these numbers again. The mental health service line is 1-800-662-4357, and the National Hope line for suicide is 1-800-273-8255. Again, thank you, Troylynda, Elder Troylynda. Thank you so much for coming. Can you drop your socials just in case someone may want to reach out to you directly?
I only do Instagram. My leader hates this, but I only do Instagram. It's Miss Troylynda 12. My email is troylynda27@gmail.com.
And Troylynda is spelled Troylynda. Miss Yolanda, my guest co-host today, would you like to drop your socials?
Well, Facebook is Yolanda Madian King, Madyun King, and Instagram is Yuli Cakes. So I'm Yuli Cakes everywhere else, which is.
And Miss Odetta, all the way from Finland. Can you drop your socials and also let us know like how we can get a copy of that book when it's in the English version?
Sure. I'm not on social media anymore, which is my husband is like trying to get me on. So probably after this, I'll have to do that. But I can leave you with my email address if anyone has any questions or anything. So it's just OdettaLeeSimmons@gmail.com. It's all together, ODETTALEE Simmons at gmail.com.
So Granger, you're on Facebook, right?
Oh, he is, yeah.
So if they wanted to reach Odetta through you,
Mm-hmm.
what are your socials?
Sure. On Facebook is GTS as my profile name, and Instagram is Granger Simmons, so you can find us there.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
For anybody that's watching from Rhode Island and is like, ooh, he looks familiar. He used to do backup for, were they Youth Singers for Christ then, or Refine 313? They're the same people, but one of those names they were at that time. So.
I was there for you singers for Christ, and so weren't you. You know that Granger was not no backup singer for the singers for Christ.
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm old, so.
You're not that old, sure.
Anyway, he was there. But he's over in Finland doing his thing, cooking and whatever else he's doing over there. All types of stuff. But it's good to have you. Thank you for stopping in. Again, we like to thank everyone for listening. If you would like to be a part of this podcast, you can reach us at LTC.OT podcast@gmail.com. You can reach me on the book at Sherla White. And you can reach me on Insta at ms_Sherla. Until next time, peace and blessings.